Today we're going to learn the proper procedures for water quality testing. First, I'm going to be taking the sample from the tank, which we're not going to be doing in class because of the time limitations that we have. The sample will already be taken for you, and I'll show you in a few minutes from that point how you will go ahead and get your sample to test. So we're actually getting two samples, one from the tank and then one into the test tube for you to test. Okay, when taking the water sample, we use what I call the rule of threes. We always take the sample 3 times and rinse the container we're taking our sample in 3 times before we use the final sample. So what I'll do here, I don't have to fill it up all the way. I'll put some water in here and kind of swish it around, and then I go into the waste container right here. This is just waste right here. We're never going to use this as a sample, and notice how nothing ever goes back into the tank. We never want to contaminate our source, or once we have our sample, we don't want to contaminate our sample. So this is my third, and now I've done 3. The next one I take will be the sample that I'll use. The reason for doing this is if there's anything left over in the container from the last time it was used, it may not have been cleaned properly, or just some of it could be the minerals left behind by the water if distilled water wasn't used to rinse it. We want to make sure that we're testing only the sample that we're trying to test, so we're not getting anything else to give us some erroneous readings. When taking the water sample, we always note and record the time and air and water temperatures. So the time is 8:35 and the air temperature is 77.2 degrees Fahrenheit. And the water temperature is 77.7 degrees Fahrenheit. Now that we have our sample from the tank, we have to get our sample for the test tube where we're actually going to do the water quality test. Again, the rule of threes. You take this test tube, doesn't have to be all the way full. Just kind of roll the water around so it's rinsing out everything that might be in here from the last time that it was used, if it wasn't cleaned properly, or minerals might build up in there. Now we're ready to take our sample once we've done it 3 times. And this is the most difficult part of the sampling. You can see right here, the test tube is not quite to the white line. We got a little bit ways to go. Now, what makes it difficult is when you dunk it just lightly, you might hit it just right, which luckily I did, but oftentimes you're going to get it a little bit too high or still not enough. We've got an easy way to deal with that, so let me show you again and make it a little bit more difficult this time to get the right amount in here. And it's a 5 ml mark. When you hit that white line, it's 5 milliliters of sample. Okay, we're going to use one of these disposable graduated pipettes. It's got measurements on it that show how much it holds in milliliters, but that's not what we're going to use it for. We're just going to use it to get the exact amount in our test tube. This is what's got the mark on it that we're aiming for. So in this case, you can see I don't have enough. I don't have near enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip it again in and see where I end up. And I'm still going to be a little bit shy, it looks like. You can see I've got a little ways to go before getting to that white mark. So what I'll do is I'll take the graduated pipette, I'll put it into the sample, and then I'll take a small amount at a time, just drops really. And as I put the drops in there, I can see when I'm getting to that line. Now remember, reading the meniscus is important to get the accurate sample, and by holding it you're not going to be able to see, because you may not have it straight and it may not be right in sight of your eye, straight on level. So what you do is you have to take it and look at it on the level surface and then make sure that you've got the meniscus in the right place. And where is that? That meniscus should be the bottom of it, which is the larger part in the middle, should be right at the white line. It's not the sides, because again, that's surface tension of water causing it to pull up on the sides. Just the same reason why it's difficult to dip a small amount of water out when we get too much in here. Now let me show you the opposite case. Let's say we do have too much water in here. I'll take a sample and purposely fill it up too much. Just the opposite. Just put in the pipette and then take out the amount that you need to get it just right. So it's a little too much. Again, you want to go on a flat surface to confirm that you've got the sample in the right place, that you're reading the meniscus just right before going on. Once I've got my 2 samples, I make sure that I've got the caps on them before returning to my desk. so none of the water spills out. Be very careful with these because these are made out of glass. It's like a test tube, or it is a test tube, and if it drops on the ground, it will break. When you're ready to do the testing, you've got your samples. They're capped with the tops of the test tubes, and on your desk you want to put about 2 sheets of paper towel down here. That helps for spillage, although these desks can take it. It makes cleanup a lot easier. Also, if a test tube or the top is down right here, it's less likely to roll and fall on the floor and break as it would if it were on the hard surface of the desk. Before performing the test, you want to make sure that you've got both tubes capped. If you have them uncapped, the problem that can occur, and does occur, is that when you put 2 reagents for a test, some people end up putting bottle 1 into one test tube and bottle 2 into the second test tube, and then you've lost this sample because you've gone ahead and tainted it with reagent for the wrong test. We're going to do 2 tests today. There's a total of 4 tests. There's pH, ammonia, nitrites, and nitrates. We're going to test 2 important ones, although they can all be considered important depending on where you are in the nitrogen cycle and what the problems might be. Ammonia is going to be the first test we do, and then pH. Nitrates takes a little bit longer, and nitrites fairly shows results except for the beginning of the nitrogen cycle, which we'll get more into that later. Okay, so I've uncapped the first test tube. I'm going to do the ammonia test. Make sure you've got ammonia bottle number 1, and you'll see as a guide, as a hint, it says to add 8 drops. To take off the top, you have to press firmly on this red tab right here, and while pressing, go ahead and twist off the top. Yes, it's child-proof top. Now, again, with the rule of 3s, this is the other incredibly important part you need to remember to do, and you will lose points if you're found not doing this. When you put the reagent into the test tube, this has to be completely vertical. It can't be at an angle other than straight up 180 degrees. You want to put your elbows on the table for stability. Always put the test tube into the rack rather than trying to hold it. That way you can put both hands on the reagent bottle. So invert it completely. Count 8 drops softly so you don't confuse others that are testing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, put the cap back on. Then ammonia bottle number 2. Same thing. Take the top off, put it to the side on the paper towel. Both elbows on the desk, and completely vertical. If you're going like this, it's incorrect. You're going to get the wrong amount of reagent in here. These tips are metered for a precise amount to go into the test tube for the test. Bottle number 2 for ammonia drips very fast, so I'll caution you and probably warn you again when you're testing. You barely need to squeeze it for it to come out. It's different than bottle number 1. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Barely applying pressure to that bottle. If you turn it over and do start squeezing, then you'll probably get 4 or 5 drops and you won't know how many you got out and have to redo it because you won't have an accurate test. Okay, you'll see kind of a yellow color in here. This test isn't ready to read yet. Put the top back on and just give it a quick shake like this. Be careful to hold it by both ends of the test tube firmly, by the cap and by the bottom, so that way you don't lose control and drop the test tube. Okay, now this takes 5 minutes to develop before you can read the color. So what we do is we look at the clock. So if we did this at about 8:56, then we'll be ready to read the results at 9:01. 5 minutes for the color to develop to get an accurate reading. The other test we're going to do is pH. There are 2 pH bottles in here, 2 different reagents. There is a pH that's light, this blue color, kind of a light blue, that just says pH test solution. And then there's a one that's red that says high range pH test solution. Now those are just names that the company gives it. High range and regularly marked don't mean anything significant, but for the range that we're testing in aquariums, this is the higher range. So we take the bottle, add 5, we've got our reminder right here, and how many drops. Make sure you have the top off the test tube, and again, totally invert the bottle 180 degrees and count 5 drops to yourself. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Put the cap back on the high range pH reagent. Place it back into the base. Go ahead and cap your pH test tube. Same thing as before. You just put your finger firmly on the top of the cap and the bottom and just give it a very quick shake for about 2 seconds. Now pH is the only test in here, both the regular pH and high range, where you can get an immediate reading. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at the card and high range pH, and we do our best to try to figure out where that reading is. Okay, looking at this one, and you kind of have to move it with the light to get a good idea of what the color is, because when you move it close, sometimes it gets a little bit darker, and when you move it away, you get a little bit more of an accurate picture. This one looks like today we're at a little bit higher than we were yesterday. It was 8.1 yesterday, and this one looks like it's right about 8.2. That's the closest match. It's got a little bit more purple color in it than it did yesterday. All right, we've had 5 minutes elapsed. It's a minute after 9 o'clock, so we can take our reading of the ammonia. Okay, now that we've had 5 minutes go by, we can take the ammonia reading, and here you can see we've still got fairly green color. If you look carefully again, not having it too close, but having it just the right distance to see the true color of green that this sample is, you'll see that it best matches to the 2.0. We've gone down to about 1.5, kind of interpolate between these two right here, the 2.0 and 1.0. And now we're back to 2.0 for 2 days in a row. So the tank is cycling. There's some ammonia in it. It's not the healthiest condition, but it's not abnormal to have some amount of ammonia in the tank when the nitrogen cycle is first kicking off. Because remember, the nitrosomonas and the nitrobacter bacteria are very slow growing. So that's kind of scary, isn't it? Sorry. Now that we've recorded the results of the pH and the ammonia on our paper, it's time to go ahead and go to the chemistry lab next door and rinse out properly the 2 test tubes that we used for today's test. Now we go to one of the sinks. It could be the front sink, which can get 2 people around to clean, or one of the other sinks that has one of these tubes in it right here. Otherwise, you're going to spray a lot of water if you don't have that, with these tubes to break it. What you want to do is just run the water and then empty the reagent and test water into the sink. It's safe to go down the sink. And now just rinse. We have our rule of 3s, but I like to do this about 4 or 5 times since we had chemical in here. You can hold it underneath the faucet if you're at the front sink. Both of those come out at a better rate. Okay, so just take these and make sure that all the water's out. And you can do the same thing with the caps, the test tubes, because that's, as they're shaken, they get reagent and test sample on them. Good, 4 or 5 times. Shake the water out. Now, what's really important, due to the high mineral content of our tap water, you want to use the distilled water. Just put a little bit in each cap. Shake it out real good, put them back here, and then with the test tubes, since these are fairly small, I'll sometimes fill them up most of the way, and just kind of rock them back and forth to get all that distilled water to rinse out the minerals, and then shake it carefully, holding on to the test tubes carefully, because remember, they'll break if they drop. Okay, last thing we do is to put up the test tubes drying. I just put the caps down on a paper towel right here, and the test tube rack, I just place them upside down. You want to be careful because a lot of times people put them right side up, and it's going to drain a lot better and faster if you make sure the side that's open is facing down. There we go. Now you can take off the gloves, throw them away, and you're done. Now, the very last thing you've got to do after you've got the test tubes and caps drying right here in the lab is to make sure in the classroom you've got everything filled out on your paper that you're turning in. Double check that your name and class period are on it, and that you haven't left any blanks blank. You've got everything filled out. Once you do that, it'll be time to sit quietly and wait for the bell.